Hi, I am going to do 3 videos about Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In this video, I will be comparing these 3 religions regarding racism to see how each of them feel about racism, whether it's an appropriate reaction for somebody of that particular religion to be racist. If you are somebody who is very, shall we say, blind faith oriented, you may not want to watch these videos because you may not like what you learn. Now, for reference sake, the books that I have used for Judaism are the Tanakh, which consists of the Torah and a couple of other things that I forget the names of, as well as the Talmud. For Christianity, I have used the Bible. I would use what's in the Tanakh and Talmud also, but unfortunately, there have been some changes. And then for Islam, I am using the Torah, which is the Islamic version of the Tanakh and the Bible. And I am also using the Sunnah and the Hadiths, which are about the sayings of Muhammad the Prophet, and also the way Muhammad lived his life. I am not of any of those 3 religions. I am merely presenting information about these 3 religions. Why didn't I put other religions in there? Well, because the majority of Americans are one of those 3 religions. And there are so many other religions in this country. Well, it would make the video really long and the research even longer. So, the basis of this video is from the phrase or the expression, you cannot be an adherent of whatever religion and be of a particular political stance too. They are mutually exclusive. So what I hear most often here in America is you cannot be an adherent of Christianity and be a Democrat too. They are mutually exclusive, or something to that effect. I also hear the same thing from the people who are on the other side of the fence, the people who will say you cannot be an adherent of Christianity and be a Republican too. They are mutually exclusive, or something to that effect. But mostly what I hear is from the people on the right side. And I would like to just point out that this whole right and left thing is relatively recent, historically speaking, and is mostly confined to this country. In addition, um, the makeup of both of those parties, and there are hundreds of parties in America, but those parties originally were very different from what they are now. There used to be racists in both parties. There used to be a very different view on conservative and liberal, left, right and left, than there is now. And so just keep in mind that the party that used to be racist, that used to be mostly responsible for the horrible atrocities against people who were not white, and sometimes even certain types of white people, were the people in the Democratic Party. But starting in the 1970s and then into the 80s, there was a big shift from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. The Republican Party was struggling at that time to survive, and as a result, they opened their arms wide to a wide variety of people so that they could continue to exist, thereby changing the very nature of both parties. So, again, this idea that you can't be this religion and this political belief are mutually exclusive is such a painfully obvious lie that I find it hard to believe that people who are spreading it actually believe it. Just like the other big political lie, the lesser of two evils in a country where there are over 420 registered political parties, but numerous lies and laws that suppress all but the two major parties. Now, you may say, well, what about the Tea Party? Well, the Tea Party is basically a branch of Libertarian and Republican, and really, the difference between Republican and Libertarian is very small. The difference between the Tea Party and the Republicans is very small. Now, in regards to these three religions, you can tell which group is wrong by evaluating each position based on hate versus tolerance. Because, at least in theory, these religions are based on tolerance, on love. But you get some people who go into these religions and become leaders, and they twist it to what they want it to be for their purposes. And unfortunately, this happens a lot. There are a lot of things I could tell you about it, but that's not the focus of this video. So after this, you decide. I am focusing on the Abrahamic religions because the Christians and Zionist Jews are the ones trying to dominate the country and are using Islam as the all too convenient target. This is not to say that I approve of Islam any more than the other two, merely that Islam is being scapegoated while the millennia of crimes of the Jews and Christians are being swept under the rug right up to the current moment. The religious information is almost entirely from the holy scriptures of each religion that I mentioned earlier. In order to attempt to be respectful to the two political sides, I have used the terms left and right, which means something very different from what they did when I was born, as I said, rather than other more specific terms. None of the statements are meant to be a blanket representation of that side's stance, because there are a wide variety of people who count themselves Democrats or Republicans, left or right. But rather a general statement that you tend to find from political figures. You may not personally agree with how your side is characterized. If that is the case, then I welcome you to politely state your personal conviction alongside with your political affiliation and your religion in the comments. Civil comments only. I will not tolerate abuse of myself or anybody else. So, Zionist Jew is disputed. There are rabbis who have repudiated the belief that Zionists are Jews. There are also Christian Zionists, and some of them, and I believe some of the Zionist Jews, but I'm not entirely positive about this, believe that they can manufacture Armageddon, the end of the world, bringing on the rapture or revelation or whatever you want to call it. They believe that they can force God's hand, so to speak, which is to me laughable because we're humans. We don't dictate to God when the world's going to end. God makes that choice. Now, since the overthrow of the Bund Party by the Zionist Party, these are Jews I'm talking about here, including abuse and murder of Bund Jews, Zionism has taken over more and more of Judaism with its Nazi-esque belief system. Zionists, even though they really didn't like each other, allied with Hitler during World War II to advance their own goals. During the debate in the UK over whether to create Israel via the Balfour Declaration, the only Jew in Parliament, Edwin Montagu, stood against it. That should be important to you. And currently in America, there are many Jews, especially Jews who either went through the Holocaust or are descendants of people who went through the Holocaust, who are very, very strongly opposed to what's going on in Israel. There are also many other Jews who are not. But that's just a side point here, okay? On race, race is a social construct based primarily on superficial physical characteristics, for example, skin color, the shape of your nose, the shape of your eyes, and so on. The concept of discriminatory racism started in the 19th century. From the 16th century until that time, it had been in reference to national and ethnic groups, not skin color and other physical characteristics. However, starting with the Spanish and then with the American colonies, which included Spanish, French, and English groups, it did kind of start at that point. So it depends on where you look for information about when and where racism started. After I wrote these notes, I started reading a book about Black American history, and I discovered that the racism that's used to provide excuses for why it's okay to enslave people for generation after generation after generation is okay, along with using religious beliefs. Um, so, really, the whole idea that it started in the 19th century is not actually factual, because in reality, it started in maybe the 1700s, I believe, or maybe the 1600s. I haven't been able to pin down the exact date or year for that matter. So, despite when it started, discrimination based on ethnic and national identity has long been a problem, with racists using false scientific claims and religion to encourage hatred of people who are different from them. Originally, there used to be a somewhat even spread of racists, as I said, on both sides, but the Democratic Party was the one that was very pro racist. Now, most of the racists are in the Republican Party. This is not to say that everybody that's in the Republican Party are racists. That would not be true. So, um, I'm going to tell you the general view that you might find from people on the right. Then I'll tell you about people on the left, and I'll tell you for each of those what the religions say about racism. So, on the right side, whites are better. Again, this is in general, specific to the racists. Even though Jesus was Middle Eastern, not Caucasian, and the Supreme Court of the United States made the determination that Middle Easterners are Caucasians, even though they have zero qualifications to do so, and it is outside of their domain, because they just couldn't stand the idea that Jesus was not Caucasian. I know that there are also people out there who say Jesus was black. I'm not going to argue. I don't think there's enough evidence to prove that, but I don't know. But now, again, what I've just said about the right side of the political spectrum is not universal. Now, as far as what those three religions scriptures say, not the people, okay? Because you can't judge a religion based on the behavior of people. There are lots of people who cherry pick what they like from the religion and they ignore the bad things, or what they consider to be the bad things. That is not how you judge religion. You judge religion based on their scriptures, based on their actual written documents that tell them how to live their lives. And you read all of it, you look at all of it. I have read about all three of these religions. I'm not an expert, but I have taken the time to read the Bible, the Mormon Bible, the Torah, not the whole Tanakh, also the Quran. I've read some of the Upanishads, and I've also read some other religious books and information. I've read a lot about Buddhism. The Upanishads are for Hindus. They are based on the Vedas, which came a lot earlier. Okay, so none of the Abrahamic religions support racism. It's not in any of those scriptures. Some medieval and post-Talmudic commentaries contain culturally biased descriptions of foreign populations, but these do not align with the Jewish scriptures. Commentaries are not the same as the scriptures. Commentaries are somebody's interpretation of the scriptures. Sometimes they are written by people with a great deal of authority, sometimes not. Usually the ones that are adopted are typically because it was written by someone who is highly respected within that particular religion, within that particular sect. But sometimes you get splinter groups that take on commentaries from very questionable sources. Now, let's talk about the left side of the political spectrum. Everyone is, and again, this is in general, everyone is equal. None of the three religions has explicit passages in the scriptures against any race unless you count Mormonism, which deems anyone who is dark as being those that were cursed by God. So that means black people, Native Americans, Asian Indians, and anybody else who's got a darker than white complexion. Obviously, not people with a dark tan, though. Personally, I believe strongly that Mormonism has a lot of things about it that are questionable, especially because of the alien planet story, but that is beside the point. Now, if we look explicitly at Christianity, the New Testament states that salvation is entirely divorced from ethnicity and nationality. You can look it up in Galatians 3:28 and Acts 10:34 and 35. I suggest you look at the information on the curse of Ham in the that I will mention later. Well, right now, really. Judaism. In the Torah and Talmud, explicit equality is established. Genesis 1:27, Sanhedrin 4:5, Numbers 12, wherein Miriam is cursed with leprosy by God for criticizing Moses for marrying a Cushite. The curse of Ham is a strange story. It's actually a curse on Canaan by Noah because Noah got drunk, which for Jews was an immoral act, and fell asleep nude, which is another immoral act. And then Ham went to check on him and saw him nude, which also is immoral, but he didn't do it on purpose. Despite that, he was concerned about his father, and then he told his brothers. And so this demonstrates in the behavior of Noah, even after he woke up, a strange departure in Judean Christianity from the normal morality, because Ham's son was cursed for the immorality and poor character of Noah. Ham himself was neither blessed nor cursed by Noah, but his two brothers were blessed. So Ham was denied a blessing by Noah, and his two brothers were blessed, and Ham's son was cursed. Noah's the one who committed the immoral acts. And if you look carefully at the Jewish texts, you will see that the whole idea of passing on the sins, especially in the Bible, to your children and so for 7 generations may not be exactly what you think. Now, in Islam, the Quran states that the differences in language and skin color are beautiful signs of God's creation. Surah Al-Rum 30:22, Surah Al-Hujurat 49:13. The Hadith and the Sunnah explicitly condemn based on skin color and ethnicity, especially in the farewell sermon by Muhammad, Musnad Ahmad 23489 and Sunan Abi Dawud 5116. The reason that there is nothing against race in these religions is because racism was created in order to control lesser people and slaves and to assert the belief that Caucasians are the superior race. So that concludes my presentation on these different religions. And we can see now, based on these quotations that you can look up for yourself that racism is false. There is no religious justification by any of the three Abrahamic religions, except for the Mormons, for racism. So you could also look up the Slave Bible, which was created in the Caribbean to trick black slaves and Indian slaves into believing that they were inferior and deserved to be slaves. You can also look in Judaism and Christianity, which have very specific information about getting and keeping slaves, very strict restrictions, but I'm going to get into that in the next video. Thank you for taking the time to watch. And again, I invite you to leave polite, considerate comments about your personal belief, your religion, and your political persuasion. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.